interventions that turns out to be so powerful. This was done in classrooms at MIT with students who wanted to learn about planned change or group dynamics or influence, persuasion. Any number of subjects could lead to this, but we called it the empathy walk. And it was sort of invented by me, and I'm having a senior moment with my colleague who was running this. Anyway, what we asked people to do was to pair up, and in the pair, they first had to discuss between themselves who might be someone on any level who was the most different from themselves. So that meant they had to talk about themselves to see who might be most different. And people would pick social status or whatever, you know, an indigent bum, a street musician, a prostitute, a Trappist monk. They would come up with really some very crazy ideas of who's different. Then they had to actually, over the next 2 weeks, as a homework assignment, to find such a person and find a way to talk to them enough to find out what that person's world is really like. And you know, people got challenged by this. They found people on death row. They did find a Trappist monk. One group of executives from General Foods who were product managers found a prostitute and offered her, get this, they offered her $200 to shop. Now, of course, she didn't believe this. She thought this was some kind of a weird way to get her services, but they stuck with it. No, look, we're product managers. We are really curious how someone like you would spend $200. So she finally agreed, and they followed her and found out that she was mostly buying clothing for her kids, which surprised them. And then they come back 2 weeks later and tell each other the stories. The reason this is profound is because we're still hearing from alumni about their empathy walk as a major influence on themselves as to who am I, how do I relate to people in other social classes. The two usually found that the person they were interviewing was not that much different from themselves, and that some of the differences within the pair were greater than between them and who they found. Now that's an exercise you can assign to yourselves tomorrow. Find someone very, very different and get into their world. And then the final point about it is, they would say, how do we do that? And we would say, that is the challenge, isn't it? How do you get into a stranger's world without offending them or turning them off? The most significant story there was when AIDS was still a very new and scary thing. One pair wanted to see what the life of a young dying AIDS patient would be like. So they found that kid, were scared to death because they'd catch it, you know. We were still in that stage. And the thing they reported back that was so profound is how scared the kid was that he would catch something from them. That was their big learning, and it was profound. One last point, the group that found a young kid on death row who had been involved in a robbery where somebody had gotten killed, and even though he hadn't fired the gun, under the law, he was also, I guess he wasn't on death row, lifetime imprisonment. The pair from the class got so involved with this kid that 6, 7 years later they got him out. They found a way to get him paroled. So I think we can invent exercises without having tea groups that are profoundly influential, but we have to be creative.
You remind me of, anybody here been to a Weir lab? Yeah. You know,
Many.
Oh, yeah.
We ran the men's lab.
Yes, that's right. That's right. I forgot about that. But I talk about a profoundly simple experience when Sheila and I went to the water lab in the Bahamas. You arrive under a different identity. You can arrive as who you, but you're encouraged to not come with your own name, in order to live out another part of yourself. You know, a profoundly simple design, and you don't know all week or more long who these other people are back in the rest of their life. And you can change identities in the middle of the lab, and you can ask people each morning, treat me different, you know. My name now is Shit for Brains, you know. And I want to be treated that way, because I want to know what that experience is like. You know, I mean, that's that's an amazing, simple, profound experience.
The Weirs invented the NDT group.
Yeah.
They took the concept of projection to the next level and said that all feedback is really a commentary on your own conscience.
Yes.
I mean, you produce whatever the images you take in, you filter around and produce a judgment which may have nothing whatever to do.
And they have a language around it.
Well, if you read in Sandra and my book, Don't Just Do Something Standard, we have a whole chapter on the language and how to get in touch with your own projections.
Mm-hmm.
But when John and I and Michael Merrill ran the 9-day men's lab for 5 years in the 90s, we took it to one step further. We worked with no names at all.
Mm-hmm.
So the men came there, were not allowed to use names, and nobody knew who anybody else was, except the three of us. And so it would be, hey, you in the blue shirt over there. And that was the way we talked to one another. And that opened up another set of doors. But John was deliberately separating himself from the feedback culture, the interpersonal feedback culture, in order to help people do their own work on themselves. And the way those labs were structured, which was very congruent with what Marv was describing, and Ed, was everybody was able to discover and work on the issues that were important to them. So no two people were doing, I mean, we're going through common exercises, but making your discovery. So you find out that part of you.
Lovely.
So where is that now?
Yeah.
That value for enabling the client to set their own learning goals, to proceed at their own pace, to use the kinds of materials that fit their learning style. Where is that in educational process, in management training? Is it anywhere?
It lives here.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
It lives here, Roger.
Absolutely.
Strongly so. I think a lot of the things you folks are saying actually have been adopted in the OSR experience over the 30 years. I not only think that, I know that. And it constantly renews. And there's constant creative experimentation and experiential learning of all varieties that go on. I wanted to say one other thing, and I'm trying to stay on the theme of OD, organization development. In my experience, which is quite different from the four of you, at least the three here, I spent all my years actually working in an organization in various capacities, sales and engineering and so forth, and management development. And you know, all of the OD work was really a laboratory. It's just a reality laboratory. And it required the same kind of invention that Ed, you were just talking about. I can remember vividly a group that was up here, an aluminum company up here in near Bellingham, Ferndale, Washington, actually. And the senior management group was having a horrid time with each other. They just couldn't get along. And there was nothing we could do, nothing we tried, would bring them through this. So I had this epiphany one day as we're going to have a funeral. And I ask everybody